This
to think about
conference will
priorities
now be
in this
recorded.
context, because certainly priorities in the pre-COVID-19 world may have been slightly different from those nowadays. We'll talk about how we can use different tools and methods for maximising focus, and how you can plan to minimise distractions. And also what we'll do is just look at sort of pure quality time management, which some of you will have come across before. One of the models I'm going to go into more depth about, which some of you who were on a call with me last week know we talked about the Eisenhower model, to do with actually important and urgent. And that for me is one of the keys to us thinking about our priorities, particularly in these circumstances. So what we needed to do first of all is think about our priorities in this particular day and age, if you like, and see whether they have changed. So my question to you is, would you say that your work priorities, focus on this, have changed since you've been forced into home working, assuming that most people on here are forced into home working? And to what extent? I've put 1, 2, and 3 there as my suggestions, but actually you may have something totally different. So I was wondering, have you found that maybe your job was entirely customer facing, and all of your business as usual activities have gone? Are you seeing that you're having to completely pivot to new priorities? Yes, I'm seeing most people are saying that. We're having that as well. Hence, I'm doing lots of more webinars. Do you feel really confused and unsure about what's important at the moment? I think that's really normal. Yes, a few people are saying absolutely. So what is important? And if that might not have been made clear to you, and actually everybody is working it out for the first time. So what is really important at the moment, which is really, really tricky. Absolutely. So I've got someone here saying, actually, she's got someone who's working from home, making sure that their mental health is okay, making sure they've got the supplies, the home working equipment. Completely new priorities, aren't there, which have been landed on us. So it is a tricky situation that we've landed on. So what we need to do is work out the difference between important and urgent activities. And the whole purpose of this is that, particularly because we're thrust into home working, we really, really do need to think about this in the context of our entire lives. And that's why we'll go into that in a little bit more detail. So normally, if we're talking about this importance versus urgent, and as I said before, I've taken a lot of this. I used to train, I was very fortunate actually to be a qualified trainer on the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which is a great business book, and do put in there if you've read the book. But this is all about these principles of understanding the difference between what's important, what's urgent, and actually a lot of the time we're driven by urgency, so which is the clock. So in the normal circumstances, everything's urgent. We've got meetings, we're busy, busy, busy. We've got to do certain things. We've got all the routines of normal office life and customer meetings, customer calls. We have got urgent things in a new home environment, in this home working environment, but whether those urgent things, which are also calls and Zoom calls, etc., are the important things is hard to say. And we have exactly that same challenge at work. When we're in the workplace, quite often where we might be working on activities that are highly important to our job role, we may get distracted by people coming in, asking us to do things, certain favors, just busy work. We can always get disrupted by things that feel like they're urgent, but actually they're not that important. So Stephen Covey always talks about this concept of the compass, knowing which direction is north for you. And that is about really thinking what's important to me in terms of my job, my work job, and we'll think about that in a bit more detail, as in what has changed in terms of importance. So as Helen's saying, where we've had to pivot, we might suddenly go, actually, what's important? So in our example, in our business, we've gone and realized, well, we can't do our normal activities. So what's important is providing a good service to our customers and our existing contacts, so we can put out quality content, because in principle, people are at home. So putting on a much bigger raft of webinars has become a priority, and updating our website to reflect that. Also, positioning about our system being more virtual performance management, that's become a priority, which wasn't a priority 4 weeks ago. It was priorities 4 weeks ago were bringing on new customers and other activities. So we've had to think about what's important in this current context. And for that, for us in our business, that was me thinking, okay, so what's going to keep our business afloat? What's going to keep people in jobs? What's going to keep people productive, but not just doing stuff, but people doing stuff that they don't necessarily have time to do during a normal busyness. So my implementation team, for example, who would normally be very busy with customers implementing, that they never have time to do the beautiful handouts that map out the implementation process or redesign the slides or update all of the documentation. Those are all things that we know we really should do, but they never get time to do them. Well, those are still important. And this is a really great opportunity to think about those important things which will make you more effective as a business or a person when this is all over. So what can we do right now, which is going to set ourselves up for success professionally? And I will also go on to personal life because it's so important to do both. Then that's the key. What do we do in terms of that, in terms of importance and urgency? So I've got a couple of personal examples on this next slide that I'll run into. I've looked at these, which might be current time examples, and I'm interested to see what you would say is the difference between important and urgent. Sometimes they're both, and I'd like to say actually that probably all of them, maybe except stopping the kids from fighting, are important and urgent. That's just something you have to do sometimes. But I was thinking about, what are your things? So I was thinking it is really important for me to continue having virtual one-to-ones to make sure that my team is focused. So that they know so that they can be productive. Because if I don't do that as their manager, then they are going to feel a bit lost and confused. And some of you on here are not sure what your priorities are. Can you work it out for yourself, or do you need a steer from your manager, or does your manager not know? If your manager doesn't know, then I would go back to your regional objectives, go back to what your role is there to do, and think, what is my job? What is my role here to achieve? What is the business that I work for here to deliver? And then think, right, what are the things that I would always think I really need to do, but I don't have the time? Or if I'd have done that differently, it would have been quicker, more effective, better. Or is it something where lessons learned, where you know that you've done something that you could have improved? If I go, do you know what, if I was to do that again, and it's unlikely that we will do it again, I would have redone the slide. I would have a beautiful set of slides ready, set up to send out. I'd have something ready to go to promote our new product range. So those are things that you can do, which you tend not to have time to do when we are in normal business as usual. So type in this chat bar, I have intentionally put daily exercise as something that's important, because if I don't do that, I actually frankly feel I go a bit insane. And also it's good for my well-being. All of us want to be able to get into those work clothes again when we finally go back to work, right? Seeing as most of us are living in Lycra. So tell me, what sort of things you think are important, either personally or professionally. I'm fine with both of those. And then what things are urgent? So certain things that we still have to do with the time frame. So we put out a podcast every Monday. So what would be, we have to let that people know about that at that time. When I've got a webinar instantly and I'm doing 2 webinars a week, then I have an urgency around creating that collateral. We had to furlough some staff, so that was an urgent thing to do, because the sooner you do it, the sooner you can protect the business and bring some money back in. So those were urgent things that I had to do as well. So what have we got here? I'll share some examples. Thanks for typing in, guys. So we've got Maria saying exercise and contact with colleagues. It's important, absolutely, to keep those relationships going and to keep your well-being going. Great. Quality calls with staff. That, Deborah, I like that term, quality calls with staff. Standardization. So by that you're saying almost going back, whereas before you might, a lot of the time we're making things up as we go along, and well, maybe you're not, I am, but you know what I mean, where you think, actually we've done something, let's turn it into a process, standardize it. It's great. Yep, urgent, absolutely. Rachel's saying you've still got to deliver salary and bonus, you've still be able to do things on schedule, you've still got those business as usual activities. Creating, Tati's saying, finding online training to support people, to help people be doing self-development. So Deborah says still FS checking, so that'd be security checking. There'll still be things that, yes, to do with security. Actually, I mean, that's a really good point as well. I think about, if, as some of you made, I'm guessing some of you financial services, if you've got something that you know will happen later in the year. So let's say you have to do a certification process if you use SMCR. There's some sort of whether you've got to redo a ISO or some sort of accreditation that maybe you don't have to do till September, but it always takes time. Maybe you could do that now. Actually, maybe you could get that done ahead so that when in September we hope we're all back to normal, you don't have to lose that week doing that activity. So I don't know, it's the money laundering training. It could even be appraisals. You could get online and do virtual appraisals with people so that well, that's not a bad thing to do anyway in terms of virtual one-to-ones, etc. But are there activities that you could do to bring people back? Got also producing e-learning to help people keep learning, says Tracy. And Simeon's adapting to employee queries. So you've all got urgent stuff, different kind of urgent stuff we're having to deal with now. But also let's try and remember, can we identify what's important as well? And those would be, are there any of the things that if we make sure we do right now where we are in a bit more control of our time, most of the time, then can we get ahead for next time? And Stephen Covey says that that is about scheduling your priorities rather than prioritizing your schedule. So instead of maybe waking up in the morning, you've got a few Zoom calls in and a blank day, then maybe identify where you can spend time on those important things like the standardization, the things that are going to get you ahead, that are going to give you an advantage in the future. And this in itself, I do think we're getting into week 3 and we're going almost through a whole sort of emotional roller coaster to a certain extent as we're in this ongoing homeworking phase. We don't quite know how long it's going to last, but certainly I get the sense it's going to go on for at least the same amount of time again. I can't see us being out of it before May, if maybe even June. So the key is keeping momentum during this period of time. And therefore, if you put in place, you don't make it hard and think, oh, what do I want to do today? Your motivation goes through the floor. We make sure that we plan our activities weekly, probably, and think, right, I'm going to spend 2 hours focusing on recertification or standardizing something, and actively putting those aspects in place. So those are, or developing the e-learning, so you can work out and plan when you're going to do what, and that actually reduces anxiety as well, because you don't have to think about what's important. You've done that thinking and you can plan it. This is my high-tech slide that I specially did for you half an hour ago. I woke up in the middle of the night. This is an exercise that we used to do. Again, when I was a trainer with 7 Habits, and lots of you might have come across something like this. And in these circumstances, it's never been more important than to balance your priorities holistically. So you could do this. You can do an equally high-tech diagram or wheel like I've got here, or you can download. I put a link at the end of the slides. We've got a download which talks about this, a self-care download, which you can access and you can draw on one. Essentially, you can use this in loads of different contexts. This particular one, I've kind of gone priorities, overall priorities, and what I want to do is make sure that my values are all being met in terms of my personal and professional values. Now, you could just go, this is my work dial, or you go, this is my home dial, but I've chosen to do both because actually at the moment our priorities we have 24 hours in the day, and everything's a bit mixed up. It's no longer 9 till 5 when you do the work stuff, if it ever was. We've got to deal with, particularly now, those of us with kids have got Easter holidays on top, so there's not even any extra work for people to worksheets and things for kids. There's lots of different ways in which our whole life is morphing into one. So what better time than to think of our priorities holistically? So I've just identified some revenue generation activities, right? Well, that would be an interesting one at the moment. That's a challenging one for anybody, so I'm not necessarily gone with that, but those would be priorities. Normally we'd be making sure we need to revenue generate. What I'm doing is trying to, I suppose, control things for the future, or maybe protect income as well in terms of save and conserving cash within the business. Marketing and prospecting activities, we'd always have to do that, but they might be slightly different activities at the moment in terms of how we address them and reaching out to the marketplace. Over here, in fact, I'll go round anti-clockwise here. These, you could argue, are still work related, so it might be a priority to learn and self-develop stuff, or it might be a priority for me to create content through which I learn. That would be a priority. And managing my team. So on this, I've got 4 work related priorities. Those are by no means all of them, but this gives you an idea. Over here, I've got quality family time. So actually not just existing together, but making sure that maybe we have quality eating together, or time supporting them with work, whatever it might be that means quality to you. It may be different to you than it is from me. Maintaining fitness and health, I've talked about. Helping others, it's a really difficult time. Do I want to find some time to do some volunteering work or helping in my community? And do I want to make sure that I'm sleeping well, I'm relaxing in these anxious times in order to remain fit and healthy? So those are examples I've come up with as priorities, and I've intentionally split 50-50 work and home. Normally, when I run this as a training course with people in the workplace, they think of just work priorities. Yet there's that adage, no one ever lay on their deathbed wishing they'd spent more time at the office. So this is our opportunity to balance everything. We need to be truly productive at work, because without our jobs and our businesses, we won't have quality, security, and family life. But equally, it's a time for us to find that balance. And the way you can do this, you put your priorities in here. And then if you said that 10 out of 10 is what you want, and it may not be the same amount of effort, you could say, you can actually say, how much effort do I need to put in? How much effort am I currently putting into this? So if I said, actually, at the moment, I'm putting this amount, 7 out of 10 or 6 out of 10 effort, and I know what 10 out of 10 looks like, then I can see I've got a gap. I might say, actually, at the moment, I'm doing 9.5 out of 10. I can't possibly do any more or put any more effort into marketing and prospecting. So there's no more to do. But the point is, you go right around this wheel and you work out where you're out of balance and out of kilter. And it allows you, therefore, to identify priorities. So your priorities are where the gaps are. So let's say I'm not looking after my fitness, and I need to schedule in a walk or a HIIT workout, or whatever that might be, and what that looks like for you. So you get the idea. It's a really simple thing you can do at any point in time. It's a really great way to just take stock of whether or not your life is in balance and things are going the way you want them to go. And of course, once you do that, this gives you a sense of control, which is what a lot of this is about. So this then can be mapped. Those priorities, those important things, would sit in either quadrant 1 or quadrant 2. And actually, most of those ones that I wrote on the wheel would sit into quadrant 2. And that's something which is important, but not necessarily urgent. Now, if we want to be really, really effective, what we're going to do in these circumstances where we have actually got more control over our time is we would schedule that in. Well, we've got more control over our time, but we've got different stresses, because I know we've got home stresses too. So the idea is always to try and to schedule in more quadrant 2 activities. Now, you've given me some of those, I think, in your earlier important activities that you said, and also they're both quadrant 1 and quadrant 2. So Simeon, for example, said an employee inquiry or query would have been a quadrant 1 activity. Quadrant 2 were things like these reprioritizing activities and scheduling things, and the sort of things we've talked about already. So these are the general headings for it. Now, the challenge that we've always got, though, is it can feel like you haven't got enough time to spend in quadrant 1 and quadrant 2, and usually that's down to quadrant 3 and quadrant 4. So other people's problems, yes. You could also add in and say those people who are parents with kids at home. That would also be, children's homework and things like that. Interruptions of a whole different nature. Many people will be getting at the moment. The flip side of it is, though, also people might be isolated, and that actually can stop you from recharging and feeling like you've got enough energy. In terms of this. So there's different things which are actually stopping us from doing things. I believe that quadrant 4 is more common probably at the moment, because there's this addiction for us to go and find out what the next bit of news is. Is Boris on a ventilator type thing? Refresh the news channel. So trying to avoid getting too sucked into things as well, which can take our focus away from being highly effective. So we get the idea in terms of this. If I was to ask you guys out there, in terms of having already looked at quadrants 1 and quadrants 2, what sort of things are you finding at home might be quadrant 3 and quadrant 4 that maybe are stopping you from being as effective as you'd like to be? Just getting a few comments coming through. BBC News Online, yeah, yeah. And the problem is, if I watch something on my phone, then the next temptation is it's almost autopilot. There's then you click on another social media app, don't you? And then you've got different time coming through. Keeping motivated is really tricky, isn't it? I don't know about you, but just started yesterday morning and I did not feel very motivated. And normally I'm pretty good at it. I'll come back to that keeping motivated one. We'll look at that. Phone and staying motivated is something. ICT not working as it would in the office, that's annoying, isn't it? Because you can't be as productive as it might normally. I guess that is a quadrant one. Is there anything you can do about it? Resolving other people's work issues, other people's interactions, that's classic Q3. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, ICT. So what I wonder then, and these are just an interruptions by family, constant flow of emails and calls being interrupted by family. So those are all general things. Okay, work setup. My shoulders and wrists, says Liz, are hurting. Liz, did you come on my and you maybe didn't come on the one last week? Get yourself a monitor if at all possible, a monitor and a chair, because you will end up with long-term problems with that in terms of that. I can't speak more, but I think it's so important to get your neck at the right level if you're into pain. I did a homeworking, and I'm running it quite regularly, how to homework top 10 tips. In fact, it's there's a little video of it, Liz, I'll send out. Do that. Yeah, it's a little video. Actually, it's quite light-hearted. I include my children in it last week. Don't take it too seriously. But it's actually got some really valid tips about what you need to do working at home. So furloughed partner is to use him as a distraction. Get him into the garden. Get him out. Give him some priority one home tasks, Rachel. That's what my suggestion is there. So my view on motivation is I woke up yesterday morning and I didn't feel motivated. And I thought sometimes what you have to start to do is do things in order to be motivated. And as soon as you feel like you've started crack that, Helen's shared the link. Thank you, Helen. Liz, that's the one to look at. As soon as you have started to do something, you feel a sense of achievement. Now, that is not being an email. So you need to these would be tips I'd say for prioritization anyway in normal work circumstances. You need to block out a special bit of time for quadrant 2 activities, right? In order to be effective, we need to prioritize them and we have to schedule them. Then the hard thing is motivating yourself to do them. So we'll come back to that. But once you schedule them, protect that time. So we need to turn off notifications. We need to put our phone away. My daughter, when she was revising for the GCSEs that aren't happening, would have to leave her phone downstairs to stop her from being distracted. Put it out of sight for that period of time while you're doing your Q2. Maybe even reward yourself that you're going to have a cup of coffee and a healthy snack or a chocolate biscuit once you've done whatever it is that you're going to do. And this is why it is better if you scheduled it, because had I got up on Monday morning, I knew what I had to do. Actually, as it was, I did. What I did on Monday, and I felt better by the afternoon, is I did some exercise. I went for a walk. I actually did half of a Joe Wicks exercise. I did feel better after that, although I hated every moment. And but I felt proud of myself. And then in the afternoon, I then got stuck into I had to do these slides and there were a couple of other things. And then I started to get that sense of achievement. Once you start to get that sense of achievement, it is self-perpetuating. So it's funny, but when you're not motivated, if you can just start on something which you know is a bit difficult and you'll feel quite pleased to get it out of the way. I think that was the book Brian Tracy, Eat That Frog, get the hard thing out of the way first, then that's a great tip. The other classic, I think, is in terms of quadrant 2, in my experience, is try and get them done at the time of day when you are the most productive. So for me, that is morning. And usually that's before lots of interruptions take place. So if you can block out a bit of time early morning, then do you know what? If you take it's a sunny day, if you take an extra long break in the afternoon, does it matter? Because you've been productive, and you need to pat yourself on the back and actually recognize yourself that you set yourself a priority and you've delivered it. And that's where you have to, in terms of doing quadrant 2 activities, the reality is quite a lot of them are a bit boring. I'm not going to lie. There's a reason that we don't always want to do them, because if there's a crisis or something that's a bit more urgent that we can jump on and deal with, that's a bit more exciting. We're all drawn into urgency. But the stuff that's going to make us effective long term, and you do get that long term sense of fulfillment, is the prevention. So the key is breaking it down into small chunks. You identify, okay, so I want to rework this user guide. tomorrow I'm going to finish module A of this user guide, and I'm going to be really proud of myself to do that, and I'm going to sit down and I'm going to dedicate the time. And then you do it, you pat yourself on the back, and you'll find that you're getting that sense of fulfillment. So the lack of motivation at the moment is you've just got to think, what would make the biggest difference? What is worth my while doing? I would hope that we all can think of things that are in the workplace which will drive your businesses forwards. And they're the things that you always felt you should do, but you never got round to doing. It's a great time to do that. Self-development and relaxation, looking after your mental health, massively important as well. So those are my thoughts, and I'm not saying it's easy. That's why Stephen Covey wrote a best-selling business book on it. But they are tools we know we should do, and it makes a huge difference. So that would be my suggestion. I'm interested actually if anyone feels that they would be able to do that. I've put a build on this slide, and it's given the answers away on this next one. Okay, so I've given away a clue for my interaction. I will go back on this. How do you feel? Just type in and let me know. Do you think that could help you be motivated? You don't have to be polite. Where you're not feeling motivated, I think it's quite natural that we're hitting a slump. The novelty has worn off of being homework, and now we've really got to be self-fulfilling. And if we're leading people, we have also got to use that extra energy to keep them motivated too. So it's not necessarily easy, but if you schedule it in, give yourself small rewards for doing it, pat on the back, and just crack on and do it. You almost find that helps in its own right. So on the next slide, Covey had come up with some names for the slides, and you've already seen them, so I will just talk through them. So he talked about quadrant 1 being the quadrant of necessity, is we do get pulled into necessary challenges. It does happen to us in terms of sometimes we have to act on a crisis, and goodness me, we're in one. But then not all of us. Some of the impact of that has been that our normal quadrant 1 activities driven by customers, maybe the customers are all furloughed, so actually a lot of that activity is now gone. So we now to think about what else is important which isn't urgency driven. And then if we're doing that, we are being effective. And when we're in the quadrant of effectiveness, we know that we are investing for the long term, and we should feel more satisfied. The danger is we are addicted to urgency and firefighting, which is what the quadrants 1 and 3 give us. So therefore, Covey's called necessity, quadrant 1 necessity, because you have to do some firefighting in some circumstances. Unfortunately, often we do more firefighting because we don't spend enough time in quadrant 2. And then quadrant 3, he calls the quadrant of deception, and that's where we are pretending we're doing important stuff, but actually not certain, we're not actually being that effective. So we're deceiving ourselves. So it's interesting here. I'm just going to read a few comments here in terms of people. So Rachel says it does help if people are engaged at work to begin with. It's easier to stay motivated. And if they're not disengaged, then it's easy for people to be demotivated. And actually, yeah, that's really tricky. If you've got a disengaged bunch of people and you're trying to push water uphill, that's really tricky. So you just can manage your own attitude. You can set goals and objectives for people. If people are disengaged and they are working and should be working from home, then I would set goals and objectives and make them short term for people to be productive. So we almost have to dictate it. Amy's saying it might be helpful to schedule a break in the day. I think so, much more so, particularly on a sunny day. Why not? And reward yourself with it. If you've done some quadrant 2 activity, feel good and have that break. Simeon says it takes small steps on days that motivation levels are low. Yesterday she was in that space and it took small actions to get me going. It did me too. So it does help. So little breaks are beneficial. So just moving on in terms of the quadrants, what you find is the 4th quadrant is a quadrant of excess, and that's where we have too much of something, and we were referring to that earlier in terms of where we get sucked into social media or BBC News channel. It's real risk of danger at the moment here. This is a little example where I say we have to be careful, because if we get into urgency, and this happens a lot in the workplace, is it almost completely cuts out the quadrant 2, because we pretend we're doing something effective. We kid ourselves that we're doing something that's urgent. We're in the quadrant deception. We then get a true urgent quadrant 1 crisis, and then we're exhausted. We're so burnt out. We end up going into excess, whether it's sofa wine, whatever, and it almost completely shuts out quadrant 2. Our motivation is low. Then, let's say we drank too much wine and fell asleep on the sofa and watched a box set. Then do you feel like being effective the following day? Possibly not. So that's what we've got to be aware of. We all are in the same position. So for me, this is making sure, though, that we are thinking holistically at the moment, because it's about your mental health, your family's mental health, and ultimately your family are as important. It's about the mental health of your team. It's about the future, making sure you're in a good position for your career and you're helping your business be in the right position. And, actually it's about feeling that you are doing the best that you can do in incredibly difficult circumstances. So my suggestion is, how do you say no to quadrant 3 and 4 in terms of those? This is an interesting one, depending on what your challenge is. Is it about negotiating with other half not to disrupt you? Is it about putting your phone somewhere else? What sort of things do you think that you might need to do in this circumstance? It might be putting Skype on to do not disturb. What things can you do to take away those distractions of quadrant 3 and 4 that potentially are impacting you? Put the phone away. Yeah, absolutely. So it's a moment for them, these to come through. Schedule time, says Tracy. Yeah. So if you know what you've got to do, and also make it really easy for yourself. A small example of back in the old days before COVID-19, if I knew what I wanted to exercise in the morning, then I needed to have my gym kit, my trainers and everything ready by the bottom of my bed, so that I could just get out of bed and go into that gym gear without thinking, because that took away the obstacles. So thinking about scheduling that in is if you know what you want to do tomorrow, having everything ready, you know where the folds are, you know where the work is, so you haven't got to spend 15 minutes trying to find the bits. Set yourself up for success, and then it's much easier to do it. Any other Q3 activities that interruptions that people need to do? Motivate myself by saying I need to finish task A before a break, or spend 2 hours on task B before a break. Absolutely. Coaching yourself to do it. Set yourself goals and then reward yourself. Notifications off, TV only during lunchtime. Absolutely. Silence your personal mobile. Agree with all of those. We know the answers to all these things. No one's saying it, but it's not that easy to do. But actually that's the key. It then becomes self-fulfilling, because then we feel we're being more effective. So saying no to Q3 and 4 is know what's important, and we started with that. Have a think about what it is. Thanks for joining, Stephanie. Yes, I can distribute the slides, and we've got recording, so you can access that too. Minimize distractions, ensure virtual meetings are structured and keep to time. Have an achievable structure and routine. So negotiate with the other half or family if needed, right? So it may not be realistic to work 9 till 5. Have a longer break. Say, I'll take the kids, will do whatever then, and don't feel guilty about it. But what I would recommend is try and be as productive as possible before you do that, and then do baking in the afternoon or whatever. Because if you've done a quadrant 2 activity, you wouldn't necessarily have got that done in the normal times. The people who are operating in quadrant 2 during these times are really motivated, right? So no one's saying it's easy to do. And my daughter is decided, well, she's very competitive. She's decided that she's motivated to try and start on her A-level work so that she's ahead. And what is motivating her is her sense of competition. The Pomodoro technique is something about breaking work into 25-minute chunks. So maybe allowing yourself, if it's an hour and a half piece of work, then you have that 25 minutes. You then have a little break of 5-minute, just stretch, move around a little bit, and you commit to doing 3 lots of Pomodoros, 3 25-minute chunks, in order to achieve that quadrant 2 activity. So it's a way some people like to work in that sort of time frame, and that helps as well. And also, now we're getting into week 3, as I say, I think make sure that the virtual meetings are structured and keep to time. People can actually be those people who are drifting, they might be a bit unfocused, so it can actually use your time up, and that stops you from spending time in quadrant 2. So people who aren't spending time in quadrant 2, they don't know what their priorities are. Definitely now's the time to get clear, even if you have to set them yourself or set them for others. Lack of goals, so being goal oriented. Not everybody is goal oriented, and those people who aren't engaged, then how can you focus them and give them tasks? And if you have a system where you can set goals and milestones, do it and capture it, because you then can capture the people who are really still performing and being productive during this time, and you can reinforce those behaviors. So that I would really recommend, especially if the people are working from home. Lack of motivation, we've talked about. Get started, schedule things in, look after your sleep and nutrition, those sort of things. Urgency culture, that's kind of busyness as well in these circumstances, but obviously if you have got lots of calls, that can take away, and distractions or environment. So if you can address those, that's going to give you a much better chance of being productive. So if there's in the comments, I'm conscious of time actually, so I'm going to allow you to, I'm going to go on to the other screens, but I'd love to hear if you've got a home or a work priority that's evolved out of this webinar, that you've thought about it and how you might schedule it in and protect that time. Do let me know. It's great to hear what you're doing. In the meantime, I've put up, those are our future webinars. We've got a couple that are quite HR related, or sort of people professional related. Then we've got effective home working or managing people virtually. Let us know if you want something different. We're doing some more on objectives, breaking down objectives, helping people. I think as things go on, we need to help people be more focused. This link here shows you, that little wheel. There's a wheel in there if you wanted to look at that. And we will usually get the slides out and a link to the video for people who've attended. So do please let us know what you'd like. I'll share some of the bits that are coming through, and thank you guys for commenting. And I'm not sure if you saw in notes earlier, the home workers who haven't seen our home working one, is really do look at the setup. As I say, we've got a YouTube video which makes the point about setup and various other tips for being an effective home worker, and that's suitable for anybody. So people are saying just check it out. Liz, did you see the link earlier? Hopefully. It's very sophisticated. We've got here, so home priorities, kids' homework, need to schedule some time every morning to go through what they need to help them get started. Absolutely, because if you can get them started and focused, then you've got that time for you to have your Q2 time, and you reward them and have a coffee and break and whatever together at 11 o'clock. Yes, head and work too long, which affects focus. I do that, Deborah, too. 25 minutes too short for me, but I just have to know what the time is in on that. And Helen's reposted the YouTube. So please do let us know if these are working for you, if there's other topics that can be useful. We'd love to hear. If you don't already connect on LinkedIn or social media, please do feel free to connect on any of the channels. And also, I run a podcast. It comes out weekly on a Monday. So yesterday was all about managing stress into productivity, suitable for anybody. And also there was one last week, which was about home working too. So you might find that useful, and all the links are there. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Wishing you a productive day, which includes getting out in that sunshine as well. Great, Candy, if you just enroll on the same way as usual, but I'll get Helen to take a note of that. We've seen that. Thanks, guys. Good to have you. Thanks, Theo. Appreciate the feedback. You're welcome, Tati. Great to see you again. I feel like I should give badges out for regular webinar people. Oh, great stuff. I'll have to, that's different too. So I take it you're HR then. So Theo, as long as you are registered, which you must be because you are on here, what the team will do is they will send out a link. It may not be today. It's not going to be instantaneously because we have to wait for the video to be synchronized, but they'll send out, because you're on the list, the links to this. And obviously, if you want any other webinars that we do, they're on our website there. So there's future, you can see the future webinars. Thanks. You're welcome. Okay, so I'm going to shut this down in a moment. If anyone else wants to comment or ask me a question, please feel free. You're welcome, Olga Benka.